Hi everyone, welcome to Writing Stories with myself, L.M. Spilsbury, and my good friend, author Kimberly D. Tate. This week we thought that it was Kim's turn to talk, and she would tell us a bit about the editing woes she's been running into with her work in progress, Circ de Tarot, although she may not limit her conversation to that. Go for it, Kim.
Okay, well, as you say, I've been working on my novel, Circ de Tarot, and originally I had sent it to my wonderful editor, and I knew I needed help with it. You know, I knew it wasn't perfect, and I certainly was expecting it to come back, with some changes, probably some major changes. And but anyways, he did send me some notes back, and at first it was very devastating. We all like to think that we're great, wonderful writers, and we probably are deep down inside. But it takes a little bit of a mining expedition to get that out of ourselves. So. Yeah, it was a little bit disheartening because what I thought was a pretty good polished first draft, and I had worked on it, so it was a little bit better than a first draft, I thought, but I thought I had the story fairly clearly developed in my mind. So when, of course, you send it to somebody else and they see things totally different from a different perspective than you do. So I got the notes back, and basically, I was going to have to do a complete revision on most of the story. Like, the first 14 or 15 chapters were good, and then it went off the rails after that. And I wanted the story to go in a particular direction, and my editor, Matt, he wanted the story to go in a completely opposite direction. So I had to kind of come to a compromise. It's the same. I think it happens with everyone when they get notes back from their editor, if they're using an editor. You have to decide what works for you and what doesn't. It's a bit like when we used to take writing lessons, and we'd be riding around for an hour and we'd have so much information thrown at us. And you would come out of your writing lesson and you would just be on total information overload. But there would be one or two things that really sort of stuck in your mind, that really sort of gelled with you. So even though you had an hour's worth of information, you came away with a couple of gems. So I had to look at the notes, and I had to kind of decide what stuck with me as something that I could use. And I have to admit, I did step away from the novel for a little while. I was fairly depressed just because it just seemed like such a Herculean task of what I was confronting. The amount of work that I was going to have to put into this thing was what I thought insurmountable. And I just couldn't even see my way out of the weeds with this one. It was just such a muddled mess. And I'm sure everyone who writes has to go through this at some point in their writing career. It's a little bit of an existential crisis, and I almost deleted the darn thing. I was just so...
Yeah. I remember wagging my finger at you saying you can't do that.
I know.
I'm glad you didn't.
And it's funny because I actually sent it to an independent publisher, and it came winging back saying they wanted to sign me. And at first I was thrilled, but then I got my notes and I was thinking, oh no, no, you can't have it like this. It's terrible. So I whipped it back from them and I said, let me work on this. Let's just put a pin in this for now. So, between the suggestions that you made and the suggestions that my editor made, I thought to myself, well, I'll just go back and work on it one chapter at a time, so I looked at each chapter and I tried to assign a value to each chapter.
And now, what do you mean by assign a value?
Well, I had to decide whether that chapter really deserved to be in the story. And what was it saying? Was it moving the story forward? Was it saying something new? Was it just rehashing old news? Had I already sort of said the same thing a chapter before?
Right.
And this was just getting stale and I was repeating myself, or so I had to kind of assign a value to each chapter and decide whether it needed to stay or not, or go. And of course, with each chapter, I had to completely turn the perspective on its head, like do a complete 180 with the perspective of the actual chapter. Like, what was I trying to say? So it wasn't so much that the chapter changed, but the character certainly did.
Yeah.
So I had to rewrite his motivations and I had to rewrite his core values. And you were the one who told me, you know, he needs to be a hero. And I thought, all I kept thinking was, yeah, you did, you know.
Okay.
And I kept thinking to myself, but he is a hero to me, you know, he's my hero, you know. But he really wasn't. You know, once I stood back and took a real critical look at it, he was doing a lot of whining and crying and whimpering and complaining. And I thought, no, that's not what a hero does. You know, a hero is someone who steps up to the plate, even though, you know, it's a sense of integrity and honor that they have within themselves, where it's kind of like that saying, you know, integrity means doing the right thing even though no one is watching.
Yeah.
So I've always kind of tried to live my life like that. And so I had to make him the hero of his own story, which is basically what everyone tries to do in their writing. So it was a real sort of, it was a real shift that I had to make with this character, a paradigm shift, and it was really hard. But I think I've just talked about this before, where, you know, you have to actually write and do like automatic writing for the creation to flow. So even though I was writing and it wasn't particularly good, things were starting to happen and I was starting to see a way out of the weeds with this one. And I hate to admit it, but my editor was right and I was wrong.
Oh, no.
I'm saying,
no.
No, it was true. It's true. You know. But anyway, so I'm starting to see a pretty darn good story coming out of this. Now, you know, whether or not it will fly with the readers, I don't know. And it's still very long, but I think, as my editor said before, you know, there wasn't enough story to maintain something 180,000 words long. So I've managed to chop out a bunch of chapters and I've edited it down to 170,000 words. Now I still think I can get it down even more. I'm just sort of going through it and tweaking and taking lines out that don't need to be there. But, you know, I'm going to step away from it after I finish this one pass through, and then I'm going to write something else, and then I'm going to come back to this one and see where I can, you know, let my subconscious mull over it. But my God, editing is hard. Anyone who says writing is easy can't call themselves a writer. You know?
Well, I think that whether we edit in a big dramatic move the way you're having to do, or whether we edit a lot as we go along, because I know that you edit as you go as well, and I edit a lot. I was looking at my current work in progress, and in some places I would have 4 or 5 versions of a chapter before I arrived at where it should really be. But yeah, I think there's a saying that books aren't written, they're rewritten.
Yes, yeah.
And I suspect, both you and I are quite early in our careers, and it wouldn't surprise me if we end up discovering that each book is different.
Yeah, for sure.
Each book, how it works out first time through and how much reworking it needs may vary a lot. I would hope that once we become more experienced, it won't be as arduous
Painful.
and painful a process as it is right now.
Yeah.
Because, and one of the problems I find, and you alluded to this, is you lose perspective on whether it's even a good story and whether people are likely to enjoy it or not.
Yeah.
So, well, Kim, I give you a lot of credit for sticking with it because I know how discouraged you were. I know it hit you really hard, and it was a real journey of the soul to get to the point where you could make something good out of it.
Well, I mean, I know that I have a tendency to, like, if I feel like I've let people down, it's not even a matter that my ego took a beating. It was just that, oh no, I've let people down, and that's just a part of who I am, that I feel really bad when I've let people down. And, my editor was expecting a masterpiece, and the first 14 chapters were, but the rest of it was terrible. And I was like, oh, I let people down. But I am working on that.
Yes, you really need to, because that's just silly.
I know.
Our books for our editors, I'm sure, are just one of many going across their desk.
I'm sure.
And their life doesn't hinge on our story being that great. So.
No, but mine does.
Yeah, it does for you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
I have to keep telling myself they're just words,
That's right. But it's that unique string of words that we've created that makes it so valuable to us.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Well, anyways, I think that you have done a wonderful job just getting this far. And for anybody listening out there, Circ de Tarot, which is a circus story, Kim's sister asked her to write her a circus story, and so she did. I think that when it comes out, you will all be blown away.
Well, I hope so.
All right. I guess that's good for today. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in, and check us out next time. Bye for now.
Bye now.